All right. Lovely. Everyone got a drink. We're all ready for the last talk of the night. Gather round, come closer, and give it up for Lorenzo.
Is it working? Let's see. Nice. So, hi everyone. The title of this talk is Animating with Code, and I decided to divide this into two sections. So the first one, I'm going to show you a bit of the things that I did, a few animations that I built, and then we're going to dive a bit more into a few components that I built. So let's start from the beginning. Actually, when I first started working as a web developer at the first agency where I worked for. Right at the beginning, we had the necessity to also post things on social media and doing these kind of things also for clients. So I always divided my workday into development, but also animating stuff, mostly in After Effects. At the beginning, it was 100% After Effects, and these were the first animations that I used to do, like very simple screen capture of websites just to post them on awards, these kind of things. Probably this one is the first animation that I ever did, and then I decided to study a bit more this kind of thing because I really enjoyed animating in After Effects, but still no code here. So it was mostly learning the easings, how things should move, and these kind of things, both for our agency, but also for different clients. But then with After Effects, there's a really cool thing that allows you to use code inside of After Effects itself, which is called expressions, and it's using JavaScript, which was handy because I was already coming from the web development world. So I started diving a bit more into these expressions. And for example, this animation here was entirely built with expressions. And the cool thing behind it is that you can basically control and tame the complexity just by adding a few sliders. And the entire motion that you see here is just by connecting everything to a single slider and then just changing the easing of that slider. Then I went into more complex animations like this one that I did for Lusion while we worked with Cognition and other projects as well. And then, of course, I always loved also making proper website from scratch. These are some projects of mine that I worked on. For example, this website here for a designer that I used to work with back in Italy. This is the intro section of the website, and it's nice because it's basically it works both as a loader, but also on click it becomes the actual homepage of the page itself. There's also these. Oh, this is quite interesting, I think. It's a bit of R&D that I worked on for my personal website, where basically at the beginning there's this animation. So sometimes I use After Effects to do a bit of research on how the animation could work, and then I jump back into code, or vice versa, it depends. And then I added also a little 3D elements, and it's nice because basically I found this little piece of, I think it was probably a broken plate in a river in Bristol, and then I took some pictures, I built it in Blender, and then I added it on the actual website itself. There are some other projects that are probably interesting, like for example, this one is my first big project, let's say, that I did from scratch. I used to work a lot with a designer, Margherita Fortuna, and we worked together, just me and her, on this website. I built the logo animation as well for the website, and also I did probably there should be behind the scenes. And this was pre-EI, so as you can see, it was very slow. The behind the scene itself, you could see the development of the little components, but now it's completely different. At least like for the way that I work now, it changed completely since like I can use agents, LLM, and different kind of tools. Let me see if there's something. Oh, there's also this showreel of a few components that I work on while at Lusion. A few micro interactions, like for example these hover effects on these buttons here. Same, another hover effect. There was like a period where I was really obsessed with like hovers and buttons and these kind of things. So you can see lots of them here. And yeah. And then coming back to the motion side of things, before I just showed you a few animations that I did for like social media mainly, but then I also pushed a bit more on the animation side of things, and I started doing proper animation from scratch, like this one here. Very simple, still very short, but also, for example, this one that I did while when I joined the Illusion, just to, I don't know, tell the world that I joined Illusion, and also a few other animations. These ones were, if I remember it correctly, some animations that I did for a website a few years ago. Then I also played with kinetic typography, always in After Effects. And then some kind of animation led me to like starting animating also on the component side of things, but coming from the animation itself in my mind that started in After Effects. And later we're gonna see an animation that I built inspired by this one here, which is quite interesting. I also played a bit with Houdini. This one was part of like a project that I did at Lusion, and other many things that I worked on. And that was like a bit of my background, and we can jump into the next section, which is the way I work, the way I build these components, how I approach these things. And I think that if I just need to say one thing that could help a lot, at least in my view, is the way of like managing the complexity. Because sometimes we see animations, like for example this one here, that it's still in After Effects, and it feels super complex, but most of the time it's just a few sliders, a few expressions, and the goal is to be able to keep the complexity as low as possible, the most under control as possible. And to do so, the thing that I do is just play around with values going from 0 to 1. There's like an example here where this is a project of mine where every time you change the page you have a nice in view effect, and it feels super complex, but in reality it's just a single value, a single ease that goes from 0 to 1, and everything else is connected on top of it. And behind the hood, what happens, I built a little demo with, for example, this circle here. I can just animate a single slider, and this is really close to what I do also on After Effects as well. This is similar to an expression on After Effects. But behind the scenes, there are so many different values. Right now, only 4, but it could be many more. And every value is connected to the main time. This I call it T, but it could be anything, and it goes just from 0 to 1. And then I can just focus on the single ease, and everything else move accordingly. This is basically the core of the animations that I do. Also, another thing that I leveraged AI a lot to do, it's basically trying to go back to the experience that I used to have with After Effects, but coding. And it's really related to this topic, because it's basically a way to build the component that builds the component itself. And by component, I mean the debug tool, which is something that I do every time. We can use many different debug tools, like there's TweakPane, DialKit, so many, but usually what I do is just prompt the LLM to build one. And usually I always start with a debug tool. I modify as many values as possible, I make it as extendable as possible, and then I just tweak the little values. And this allows me to abstract the complexity of the component itself. This, for example, is really similar to an animation that I showed you before, and it's actually being used on a page here, the ads engine. It's this component here. And you'll see that it's super similar to the one that I did in After Effects. So basically, I rebuild the entire animation, but with code. This one here. And basically, the way it works is that there's a card in the front that just rotates 90 degrees and then disappears. I can make it go away. And then, as before, as I showed you, there's like a slider that just animates these cards in a sphere. And the sphere is here. It's still inside the debug as well, the debug tool. And in this way, I can really dive into how it works, if there's like some things that I don't see while it's animating. But at the same time, everything else is super adjustable, so I can change anything. If I go to the end of it, and I see that the sphere, as of now, is really squashed on the x-axis, I can just tune it down, and it goes back to a normal sphere. And this helps me a lot, having like a broad idea of how the animation works. And this is something that I learned using After Effects. And then I can just play the animation from the beginning, and it works this way. Another example where I used a lot the debug tool is just for also for simple things such as like icons or icon animations. This could be done easily in Illustrator or Figma, but I find it much more useful to build something that is very customizable. I can change the thickness. I can see the way that it morphs into the pause button. I can change, for example, the width of this icon here, and it still blends with the pose. So it's really useful to build these kind of systems. And another example of this is for this component as well, where basically I had to build a system that allows me to have a 3D path and cards going in this 3D path. And doing these kind of things, for example, in Blender, animating path, 3D path in Blender or Houdini, it's really complex because you have like so many things to take into consideration and so much complexity. So coming back to that topic about taming the complexity, I came up with this system where basically I split the 3 axes into 3 different sections. So for example, here I have only the y-axis, and I can just change it around, and all the cards just follow the main one. So I could easily change the path, and as you can see, it's going towards us, and that's managed by the z-axis, for example. I can bring it down, I can change it really, really easily. But at the end, it feels complex, but it's just a matter of simplifying the problem. And also, I always have this value that right now is going from 0 to 100, but it's the same logic as the one before. This one here. Then I add many tools, like this path here, and it works this way. Also, another thing that I always take care of when I build animations is to make sure that they are, as I say, spam-free. For example, this animation here, the idea was to be able to change the actual image on top of the card itself while clicking on different buttons. And something that could be really straightforward could be to think about just swapping the image or like rotating the card itself. But this could lead to some problems. Like let's say that I click on another button while the card is still animating or it's still rotating, and this could lead to some kind of glitch effect, which is not really nice. So I came up with this bounce effect with a stagger, and this let me also have the option, which is like comes together with the actual logic of the animation itself, to not worry about someone clicking on like random buttons many times, because it was just a simple movement at the end. So that was also part of it. And this is another demo that I built, where we have the same kind of logic of like cards that interacts, and they never like, it's always interpolating between one state and the other. And I still have my debug panel here on the top right, where I can change things such as the active ratio, the amount of cards, the perspective itself of the component. Or for example, I can change how large it is, many different things. And basically the way it works, if I just reduce the number of cards, it's just like teleporting one card from one side to the other, so that I can just see the front as if it was a book, potentially. Also, coming to the end, one thing that I also leverage is not just the debug panel itself, but I think that with ElevenLabs nowadays it's really easy to include the debug panel in the component itself. So for example, what I did here for this component, it's basically, this is like morphing from a button to a segmented control. But if we turn on the debug tool, I can see the placement of the button itself. I can also change the width of the segmented control, and I can make sure that it's always responsive, it's always looking great, and I can just close it back where it used to be, because this needs to be a component that I don't know where it's going to end up in the page. So I had to build a system like this one, at least to speed up the development. And that's pretty much it on the animation side. And those are like the main things that I always take into consideration. So simplifying the animations, making sure that the complexity is not too high, and coming up with like different ideas to make sure that the components that I built are always customizable, and that the complexity. I think that the biggest blocker, and also I think that the biggest difference between animations done in After Effects and in coding is always related to how complex it gets into the coding side of things. So if we can keep it really simple, just from like an interaction point of view, this is like really, really, really great for the component itself. That was it. I did a bit of compacting.
Questions?
You go.
Okay. Really lovely talk. Two parts. First one, for anyone who is just starting on this path of really thinking through like animations in product and things like that, like you said, complexity is the biggest thing. Many of the things I've used so far, my engineers are like, and how do you have those kinds of conversations? Obviously, clearly you're experimenting, but then for someone starting out, how to do that? The second part of it is now, in terms of ideating, like you've demonstrated so many hidden things that you're using as a guiding. Yeah. How do you come up with those ideas to help you just break down the complexity of those things?
Okay, so good questions. To reply to the first one that you asked me, I think that the biggest thing that you can do is just to try to copy other components, other animation that you like, and also leverage the LLM to teach you what you're doing wrong, because it's really, really useful. Everyone is using LLMs to speed up the development, but it's really useful also to learn how things should work so that you can then speak with the right words. Because like there are some words that it's basically like a summary of a much longer description of what you want, and you can just use that words. And there are also many websites where you can find really nice animations, such as Savvy, for example. I use it a lot. These are just animations that are basically done probably mostly in After Effects, but you can just take inspiration from them. This probably also answers your second questions, like how can I come up with these kind of animations? It's mostly just practice, I'd say, and looking at many, like for example, this one here, it's the first time that I see it. It would be really nice to just try and do it again. Probably it would be nice to start with something simpler and then add complexity on top of it, just at the end. And yeah, this is what I do.
The second question was not so much with the coming up of the idea. I'm referring to like when you break it down, you've got this circle thing, like in terms of like, and then you've got this line that you're using to break the concept down for yourself and make things easier. That's what I'm trying, like how do you recognize those hidden things that help make the animation?
I think that's mostly just, I'd say, practice. And like for example, this one here, let me go back. For example, this one here, I knew that I didn't want to see cards behind. So right at the beginning, when I had only one card, I said it must teleport on the other side, because I don't want to see like noise on the background. And then I said, but when I actually land on a card, I need to have some space to see it, because at the beginning it was like this, and I couldn't actually see a cover. So I added what I call active gap ratio. And then I can also leverage these ratios from 0 to 1. And if we go to the actual page itself, I added a bit of animation to it, so that it's basically animating the values that I use for the debug tool. So for example, here we can see that it's it's only at the end where I increase the active ratio from 0 to 1. It's basically always like this, and only at the end I actually animate the last section. But that is basically something that I realized while doing the component itself. Thank you.
I noticed that lots of your work is about like showcasing content instead of a simple like visual effect where accessibility kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
And as you are building components, I think is where comes handy to fabricate accessibility features.
Yeah.
Could you share some experience?
Like I have this example here. This one needs to stay inside a page in ElevenLabs, so it must be accessible. And what I actually did here, you cannot see it, but there are two invisible buttons. There's one button at the top, and there's the segmented control at the bottom. They're always there. They're just invisible. And this is something that I use both from accessibility and also to know how the blend between the two items needs to work. Because otherwise I don't know where to go. I don't know how these components should work and these kind of things. So basically I'm always taking care of the accessibility. When it's something like this, I do not, because it's not meaningful. If it's just an image, if it's just something moving. But when I need to, for example, with these buttons here, I'd say that it's also the easiest part of it, because you can also ask the LLM to help you out on all these accessibility features and these kind of things. And once you have the animation done, most of the time it's just like the last 2 or 3% of the time that I spend on the accessibility. Yeah?
I wonder, nowadays, when you create an animation, how the workflow changes? Are you fully shift to from the After Effects to LLM, or are you still missing some parts?
So I really like this question because I experiment a lot. I tried so many different tools. I tried Blender, After Effects, Conductor. Now I'm trying Cursor, but I mostly use Fable inside the terminal because I find it easier, more straightforward. And usually when it's something that I know that I can do it quickly with After Effects, I just do it with After Effects. Something that I want to try that I still haven't tried is to give the After Effects project to an LLM to see if the LLM can understand what I use. This is something that I still need to try. But most of the time I just experiment a bit. I search for references online, these kind of things. But mostly if I need to think about it, I just look at the Figma design, and then I start prototyping as soon as possible with code. I start with something super simple. Like for example here, I just had a button that allowed me to just see the cards bouncing without any buttons, without any images, because these are things that are nice to see while you work on it, but they don't add anything to the actual complexity or the animation itself. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you want to go?
I've got quite a few questions, but I'm not going to be too greedy and I'll choose just one.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I notice quite a lot when looking at web animations is that a lot of them feel, for lack of a better word, webby, as if there's some giveaway side that it feels like a website. And usually for me, that's things like maybe if I'm moving the cursor, it's an animation will hover, maybe it kind of snaps back once it moves off and once the mouse moves off. Or maybe there's just slightly funny performance issues where it's just laggy enough that it feels a bit off.
Yeah.
But all of your sort of demonstration animations, they very consistently feel very polished, as if they are sort of OS shell animations or something like that. So, are there any patterns in the way that you refine your animations to get them to feel polished and not webby?
So I'm really glad that you noticed it, because that's my main obsession over this kind of animation, making sure that they're not just fluid, but that if you interact with them, you're not breaking. It's basically like iOS. It's like the leader in these kind of things, where you can just do whatever you want, and it's always interpolating between one state of the animation to the other. That's where my focus is most of the time, and this is where things really can get quite hard and complex, I'd say. And I think there are many different tricks to achieve these kind of things. For example, using springs when it's needed instead of just easings, because springs are like easy to break and start a new one without any issue. Most of the times you see like websites with animations that if you go on a hover and then you go back right when it's like was halfway through the animation, it just snaps back to the beginning without a nice animation. But also like very detailed tricks. Some of them are well known. Like for example, if you hover a button and it shrinks down, then of course when you're on the edge of it, it's just gonna start bouncing back, because it's shrinking, but then again it's gonna, so it's better to use another div on top that you don't shrink as the state of the hover, so that you can just control the two things in a different way. So it's again comes back to like practice, and when you see that there's an issue, most of the times, like 99% of the time, there's also a solution to it. So, and again, asking the LLM how to solve this issue, most of the time it's really helping you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was thinking with like the more accessible with LLM, and then you can also ask them to build you animator like that. How do you see After Effects in your future workflow?
Okay. In my workflow, like to prototype animations or to actually build animations from scratch?
To prototype, to export, because my thing is like we're slowly moving clients' animation into plugins, so they can also use it themselves. And sometimes it blurs out the boundaries of when should I use an After Effects.
I see. Like in my workflow, personally, I think that it's gonna take the same path that Figma did. Like nowadays, I use it not that often anymore. At the same time, I'm not using that often After Effects, because it's much easier to just ask the LLM to build the animation that I have in my mind. And also on top of this, there's like a big advantage of just being able to customize the animation runtime. And this is something that it's really hard, if not impossible, to do with After Effects. So probably in the future, I don't know if I'm gonna still pay the subscription for Adobe. That's the thing. Yeah?
Yeah. I love the idea that you need to simplify everything and just use one kind of parameter that you're changing. So as far as I understood it, and correct me if I'm wrong, so it's basically you defining the relationships between objects, right? So like how they move and like defining the system how it moves. So I wonder how you what's your approach to that, or do you have already a certain patterns that you kind of replicate from one kind of case to the other, or when you approach a new animation, let's say, the new motion that you want to do, is there a certain tricks that you kind of...
Yeah, the pattern is always the same, and it's also, now that I think about it, helping me a lot not to use timelines. I'm really opinionated on timelines and I never use them. For example, here I have an animation that it happens to start with a fade from 0 to 1, and then it goes back from 1 to 0. And someone could have used a timeline. But then a timeline is really like a fragile piece of software. Like it's really simple to break it. And this is my go-to every time. It's like the remap function that remaps a value from 0 to 1 to whatever else. And for example, this opacity now, it's remapped from 0 to 0.25, and from almost the end to the actual end when it goes back to 0. So as you can see, it starts, if you look at the bottom right slider, it starts from 0, it goes all the way to 1 when I'm at 0.25, as I said in the remap function, and then it stays at 1 and it goes back to 0 when I'm 0.75 back to, and this is basically a way to, again, to simplify instead of using a timeline that would be so complex, just to use a simple slider. Yeah.
Round of applause for Lorenzo and our other speakers. Fabulous. That was good, wasn't it?